Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, John Knocklinger. I'm a men's divorce coach and a New Jersey divorce attorney and mediator. Today, we're going to discuss how just breathing can be life-changing and a perfect alternative to traditional talk therapy. My guest for this conversation is Teresa Trieb. She is a somatic breath therapist and helps her clients gain access to their subconscious mind, release trapped emotions, and help rewire their brain through the power of transformational breathwork. Thank you for being here today, Teresa.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
It's been my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation since I went through one of your therapy sessions recently. In fact, as you recall, it was the day that we had an earthquake in New Jersey. we're just about to start, and I'm telling her, I'm like, the whole house is moving, and I'm sure you've heard about it on the news since then, because it's not very often the New York City area has an earthquake. But anyway, much like the earth rattling, the therapy session created something of an earthquake inside my head. So we're gonna be talking more about that. Maybe it was foreshadowing, right? That earthquake happened right beforehand.
Absolutely.
But before we get into the therapy process itself and what it is, because I think that's going to be an important part of our conversation today, I'd like to start with learning a little bit more about you. Can you tell our listeners how you got involved in breath work and how it's changed your life?
Absolutely. So I was a former competitive pro athlete, and initially I wanted to start increasing my lung capacity with breath work. So I stumbled across this modality, and I thought, oh, that's great. I can improve my performance even more by just breathing differently. So this is how I got into it. Just 5 to 10 minutes per day. And then I noticed that there was something changing inside of me. The state of my mind changed as well. And that was basically the meditative part of breath work, which I learned later on that this was, the second part or the second type of breath work. So from performance enhancing breath work, I went into the meditative breath work. I kept this going every day. It was just a modality that it was very easy to maintain for 5 to 10 to 15 minutes per day, like very, very quick in the morning. And I had immediate effects. Just 5 minutes changed my whole state, whether I was upregulating to get my productivity going, or I was downregulating to just calm my nerves. So it was something that was just very, very captivating for me personally. And then one day, I will never forget this day, I was doing another session. And at that time, everything was online. I had no chance to do this somewhere else. And I did this session. It was called DMT breathing. And it was 45 minutes. I was like, all right, that's going to be interesting. I've never done such a long session. I'll just try it. And I did it. And it was not performance enhancing. It was not meditative. It was transformational breath work. And it was mind blowing for me too, because there was nothing that I expected. I was just somewhere else, and it changed myself completely from just one session. Because up to that point, I was dealing with panic attacks and anxiety and episodes of depression. And I never really talked about this because I was very ashamed of it. But it changed and literally stopped with this one session. It just was this breakthrough where I was somewhere else. I remember laying there after the session for 30 minutes, just processing what just happened. And that was initially what sparked everything for me, because it was literally life-changing for me. I had no panic attacks anymore, and they were really prone to me. I had them at some point every week. Very intense. And with the session, they just stopped. I had one more panic attack after this one, months after, and I did another transformational breathwork session, and it was completely gone. And it has been a long time since then. So this was initially what it sparked for me, that interest in how life-changing it was for me. And, then I went down the spiral, got educated, read all the books that were out there, and got a certification after certification. It was just, I knew that this was something that I wanted to pursue and help others with.
Well, I mean, it helped you so much. You probably were like, my goodness, this could help people do it in all sorts of different ways. So
Absolutely.
I'm interested. So you were a professional athlete. What were you doing?
I was doing natural bodybuilding, competitive in the pro league.
Wow. So how was, I mean, obviously we can all think that, I guess the breathing work helps you just take in a lot more oxygen into your body, which probably is performance enhancing. But let's talk about the meditative part before we get to the transformational. Like what was the meditative breath work doing for you? How was it working? Did you see any results then, or was it only when you went to the transformational breath work?
No, I saw the immediate changes after literally every single session I did. And this is why it was so easy for me to keep going, because, with everything, you have to keep going to have an effect, whether it's weight loss or, learning a new ability. You always have to keep going. But you have to kind of, foresee that you see some changes in the future. With this, I had the immediate effects after 5-10 minutes. It changed literally the state of my mind, state of my emotions. And this is why it was so easy for me to keep going. And in the morning, I was like, oh, just like brushing teeth, I'm going to do my breath work. And so, yeah, for the lung capacity, that was a little longer process to see the immediate changes in the workouts. However, with the meditative breath work, that was very, very easy to see, because after 5 minutes, and it has been proven by science by now, that you change your state of mind, your neural pathways. This is where you just calm your nerves in the situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people are probably listening to this saying, well, this is a podcast about divorce. Why in the world are you guys talking about breath work? Well, as I teased in the opening, really, this is an alternative to other therapies. It's something that you could do as opposed to doing talk therapy, or you could do it in combination with. It's just another way to get you to the next step or the next part of your life, and kind of get you through a barrier that is holding you back. So I do want to talk a little bit about what do you think transformational breath work can accomplish that maybe traditional talk therapy can't? It could be a concrete thing it can't do, or maybe just the amount of time it takes to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, so this is the beauty of this practice. You usually have an immediate effect, because you're in this session, you go into the emotions that you have suppressed for a long time. Probably you're not talking about them, and even if you're talking about them, it's just on the cellular level that we're digging into the emotions. We're going out of the mind into the body. And I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's about trauma and how the body saves the memories in the body. And it's really interesting, because it by now, it was long not proven how this is actually happening, but by now it's proven that we hold all the memories, all the trauma, everything that we have experienced in our body, in our cells, in our fascia. So yes, this is an alternative to talk therapy, because talk therapy is on the conscious mind. We're talking because we are aware of what's going on, or we want to get somewhere, but it's always on the conscious side. With breath work, transformational breath work, we're going deeper. It's the subconscious, and this is why we don't have to talk about this. It's afterwards, it's whatever you're experiencing in the session. Afterwards, you have just clarity coming through. Things that you were not aware of are coming into your mind. The patterns you've done before that were not clear for you, why you did it, they're becoming clear now. And this is the transformational part of this.
So whenever you are doing transformational therapy with one of your clients, do they always need to have like a very specific goal, or can it just be sort of a let your body tell you what your body needs to tell you sort of session?
Absolutely. So my line with this was always like, this is an alternative to talk therapy. It's therapy without talking. And I mean this because especially with men, I've seen that they don't want to talk about their feelings. And not that this excludes the women, but it's sometimes we don't want to get to that point where we want to talk about certain things. And with this, you don't need to disclose information with me. I mean, obviously, for me, it's always better to have any information about your situation and what you're dealing with. However, it is not necessary, because in the end, the breath and your brain is going to show you inside of you, and I can't see what you're dealing with. That's only you. That's what's going to change the situation for you. So this is why we don't need to talk about certain things, because essentially it is being triggered by your own breath and by your own brain activity to your own mind.
So I think people listening to this are probably like wondering, okay, well, Teresa, I've heard about how this can really help me. What the heck is it? Like, what is it? So I'll tell you, one of the things when Teresa and I first started talking about her being on the podcast, she offered to put me through a session so I could see what it was. And I can't even tell you how helpful it was, because I didn't do any research in advance. I didn't watch any videos. And it's funny, one of the first things you told me was, if you've seen videos, you might see some weird stuff or some odd things that have happened. And I'm thinking like, well, I'm glad I didn't watch any videos. But at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things that, I'm able to do this. I'm able just to take leaps of faith and just put my faith in somebody else that's a professional and just say, do it. A lot of people in this world aren't like that. A lot of people in this world need to know what it is before they set foot in something. We could have a whole nother podcast about why people do that and why they can't just, find somebody that's a specialist in helping them and let that person just help them and just sort of let it happen. But let's talk a little bit about like the bells and whistles of exactly what transformational therapy, breath therapy is, and kind of how it goes. So obviously I didn't say this earlier, you live in Germany, so you do this work for people everywhere. So she can work with people all over the United States and Canada and Australia and everywhere else, because this is something that can be done over Zoom, because you and I did it over Zoom. So it definitely can be done. So I guess the first question that I have still from our session is, do you need to have someone like yourself guiding you through this therapy? Or is this something that once you learn how to do it, is there some kind of, something that's maybe like an audio, like something like that you can just download that you can do it on your own? That's something I've been wondering since our session. Like, do you need to have someone guiding you through the process?
Well, I mean, essentially, when you come back to my session that I did, I had no one there, but also I had no idea what I was doing. Now, I don't recommend doing this by yourself when you have no person there, at least virtually, because I feel like there can be a point of overwhelm and you are still being watched. Even though you have been through the process, you know that you're safe in that moment. However, you are in a state of hyperventilation, and sometimes you can get stuck in that hyperventilation because you want to get more out of it. Just recently, I had a client who were actually already in the down regulation part at the very, very end, but he thought he wanted to get more out of it because it was so mind blowing for him. So when we were guiding him into calming his breath down again, and towards the end of the session, he just started breathing in the upregulating breathing technique again, and I had to stop him. So this can happen when you're by yourself because no one is watching you. So I would definitely recommend having someone virtually or in person there to guide you through the session, because essentially, I mean, you're aware of what you're doing. However, you can get carried away in that state.
And listener, we're going to be going through what the session looks like. So, you're hearing some things that might not make much sense, but, as we continue this conversation, they'll make sense. I'll tell you, one of the things I experienced was a lack of sense of time. Like, I didn't know how long the session had lasted, whether it was 10 minutes or 2 hours. I wasn't entirely aware. So it is true. Like, I knew I was laying on a bed. Like, I knew Teresa was on a computer next to me, but I wasn't quite always really aware of what was going on, because you do get to a point where you are deep inside your own thoughts and you're just sort of, you're kind of out of it. So I do think having someone there would be very, very important, because you need somebody that can help guide you, particularly if, as you just made this comment about hyperventilating. We need to talk a little bit about that, because listener, let me tell you something. When we first started, it was kind of like a pharmaceutical commercial. Like, Teresa went through like all of the things you need to know and all the warnings. And I was like, we were like 10 minutes in, I was like, oh my goodness. But I'm glad that she did, because, some of the things that happen during the process, if you were not consciously aware that it was going to happen, it could freak you out a little bit. I think so, because, you're breathing in a way that isn't natural, that we don't breathe. So why don't we start with, you talked about the, I don't know what phrase you use, but you sort of gear up to a very high point, and then you come back down.
Yes, we're going from the down regulation to the up regulation. We're breathing into an ecstatic point.
Right. It's just like exercising. Just think of it like this. You're warming up. You're like on a cardio machine. It's like getting to your target heart rate and then doing a cool down so that your heart rate can come back down, so that you can, knock it off your machine and pass out from, your blood pressure being too high. So if you think about it like that, that's kind of the way I thought about it. Is it's kind of like, warming up, getting to a high heartbeat, because you do at the top point of the therapy, you do get very stimulated. Let's put it that way. So why don't you tell us, like, how does it start? Like, how does the therapy start?
Yes. So usually I have about 30 minutes that I explain everything. And I put a lot of emphasis on the intro and the introduction, potential questions, because I have experienced that I go to a session and within 5 minutes, the teacher or the therapist says, let's go. It was like, hi, I'm glad you're here. Let's do this. And now that I'm facilitating myself, I always think this is very, very irresponsible, because, I mean, yes, you're in for a treat, you're in for an experience. However, there can a lot of things come up mentally, physically, and emotionally, and you just, at least, you have to be aware of what those things are. So usually in my sessions, I talk through all of those reactions that can come up.
And I will say, I'm really glad that you do that, because one of the things that happened during my session was that both of my arms, the feeling that you get, like if you you sit on the floor and you sit on your leg too long, your leg like falls asleep, like that feeling of just, I don't know.
Cramping.
Yeah, like not sort of cramping, but also that it's almost like a million ants all over you. Like it's kind of like a weird, like not an
The
itchy
tingling.
thing. Yeah, I got that in both of my arms. Like, and it wasn't painful. It was just uncomfortable, but it was both arms, and my arms were like I wasn't sitting on them or anything. So it was a physical manifestation of what was going on, because I know a lot of what you do in this it's a neurological sort of reaction. And so it's weird how your body reacts whenever you're purposely trying to fool your body to sort of get out of its normal rhythm so that you can actually get to your subconscious. So, I mean, I think that's wonderful. And I got to tell you, if you hadn't told me that, I probably would have opened my eyes and been like, what's going on?
That's a typical reaction.
Well,
That's
but
why
if
I
you
put so much emphasis on it.
right, and if you don't warn people, and warning's not the right word, because it's not a warning, because there's nothing
Educating.
educating. It's just there's nothing bad. But if you sort of don't know what to expect. And I got to tell you, the most important thing is the hyperventilation, because you do start to hyperventilate, and I don't hyperventilate. That's just not something I think at least I haven't done it in a very long time, if I've ever done it. A lot of people are familiar with what a hyperventilation is, where you feel like you can't even catch your breath. So it really is. I think I don't know. I can't imagine having done this without that level of instruction. So I'm glad that you do that, particularly that the first time you do it with somebody, they need to sort of know. So, okay, you've given your introduction. People have asked all their questions, and now you're ready to get started. How do we get started?
How do we get started? I tell you to get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't do this practice sitting. We do this practice laying down, completely flat, not even your head elevated. And then we start breathing. And usually the session starts out with a short period, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the session, of nasal breathing to just calm down. It's the first entry point of stress relief. Usually there's a lot of sensation going on with coldness because of the stress release most of the time. And then we start gearing up. And this is when about 5 to 10 minutes, and we start with the technique, which is through the mouth. And it's a 2-part breath. So just to demonstrate a little bit, it's 1 breath into the belly, 1 breath into the chest, and then it's out through the mouth. And it's a continuous cycle. So 1 loop after the other. And this is how you get the oxygen going. Actually, it's not necessarily about the oxygen exchange. It's more about the carbon dioxide exchange. So you breathe more carbon dioxide out than you breathe in oxygen. And this is how the hyperventilation starts. And in the beginning, I have to push people a little to start doing this, because it is very uncomfortable in the beginning, because it's very unnatural. We usually breathe through the nose, at least this is what you should be doing, and then you suddenly have to breathe through the mouth in a different pattern, and it takes about 5 minutes to get comfortable with this, and then the subconscious takes over and it feels natural to you. But at that time, I usually still breathe with the client and just push him a little more and remind him of the breath all the time, so that becomes the natural pattern to breathe.
Yeah, you're acting as a coach throughout this whole thing, just really encouraging somebody to really, take these breaths, and you're talking about like the mechanics of how the breath works, but really it's just a matter of you're helping someone get into this state, because that's just getting them into this state where they can access their subconscious. What I think is interesting about this is you as a therapist in this way is not the one that's actually helping someone look into their subconscious and find what it is they need to work on, you're just creating the environment, helping create the environment so that your body can naturally do what your body does whenever your subconscious is at work. I kind of think of it as it's almost like being in a dream state, but you're way more conscious of what's going on, because you can remember in detail, or at least I could remember in detail what I was thinking and feeling during the process. So it wasn't so much like a dream where if you like wake up, you like immediately forget. But I can imagine that the most important thing is the feeling that you are left with after this is all done. What do you really want your clients to take away when you take them through this whole therapy? And we'll get back to the more mechanics in a minute, but what is it you really want them to take away from going through this process?
So one phrase that I repeat over and over throughout the session is that they feel safe. So this is the part you mentioned before, that there is someone with me, even though I am essentially doing this by myself. And like I said in the beginning, I don't know what's going on in your head. This is not the typical session where we have that exchange of words. In the end, I don't know what happened in your mind, because if you don't share it, I still don't know. I just push you. I just guide you through this session. I have some talking points that I give, and some sessions have more talking. Some sessions don't have a lot of talking. It just really depends on the situation we want to create. However, in the end, I want you to feel. This session is about letting go of control, and really feeling into yourself again. And this is when the brain activity comes into play, because the cells are being activated. And this is when you have that vision, or that a situation created in your head. That is the emotional part, because it's about creating an emotion that you haven't felt in a while, or recreating an emotion that you haven't felt in a while. And we want to get to that point. And there's this emotional wave, and it can be sadness, it can be joy, it can be anger, it can be anything. Essentially, we just want you to feel, and then truly feel. So that's what this is all about. And then afterwards, you have that sense of peace within you, whatever you went through, making peace. And still, at that point, I still don't know what happened inside of you. So this is what I create through my voice, through the safe space that I'm trying to portray to you, so you can let go.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's not always specific. I mean, I'll tell you from our session, really what I left was I was having self-doubt about various decisions that were going on, and it's interesting because when we were done, my sheets were wet because I clearly was crying a lot during the session. But what I was thinking about wasn't anything sad or happy. It was just this self-doubt that I was having. But it was interesting. There's emotional transference that's happening too. It's like your body's like shedding itself. It's like I don't know. It's almost like you're washing off your subconscious with a hose. Like you're just coming out of it with just I think with clarity. I think one of the things you told me was a lot of people, if you're going to be making a big decision, the day or two after you go through this is a great time to do it, because you've got such a crisp mental clarity. I think that's absolutely correct. I had no idea whatsoever what I was going to come out of this with. Even when we started doing the breathing, I was like, I'm okay. What am I supposed to think about? But I try not to overcomplicate it and just sort of see what happens. And that's exactly what happened. I started thinking about the doubt I was having about various things, decisions I needed to make about business things, like, really professional things. So I think what's interesting about this is your subconscious, I think, just tells you what you needed to know. I mean, it really does. And it's like, I say sometimes like your conscious versus your subconscious is like the good versus evil, because it's like, your subconscious, I've had people on the show before that talk about how it's all developed, before you're like 6 or 7 years old. We all learn how to think, how, what we learned from our parents when we were, infants and toddlers influences the rest of our life. It influences the way we think about things. And this is just like, it's kind of like seeping through all those cobwebs and really getting down to the core. And I got to tell you, it was really, really interesting. Really, even when we were done, I kind of walked around the house for a few minutes. I was like, that was unexpected. That was interesting, in a really, really good, positive way. So you're having someone get into this hyperventilation mode. You were talking about how it takes about 5 minutes for someone to like body to really just be doing it automatically, which when you first start, you're like, there's no way I'm going to just be automatically breathing like this. But you do. What point, like, how long does it take someone to be breathing like that to get to the point where someone really starts to access their subconscious and really starts to, see these images and everything in their head?
It depends, because it really comes down to how easy you let go. Most of the time, once you have that pattern of breathing down, your sensations already start. So most of the time, it actually happens within the first 5 to 10 minutes. And it starts very slow. Most of the time, it starts with dizziness, because you're entering that type of ventilation state with your brain. The exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So this is when the dizziness happens. No, you're not falling down. You're not falling over because you're laying down. It's just a feeling that is your mind is creating for you, the mind games. However, and then it's just a rippling effect of all the other sensations that could come up. And I say could come up because it does not have to be that way, because 50% don't even have any physical reactions. And this is why I warned you in the beginning, and everyone else that is doing a session with me. What you see on Instagram or on the internet is not necessarily true, because this is creating attention, right? We all create videos and pictures to create attention, to get clicks and whatever. However, this is not necessarily the truth of those sessions. I have clients that lay there just like they're sleeping, and they come out of it, and because I can't see into their minds. I'm always eager to hear what they have experienced, because I don't know, did they have any experience or not? But they all have an experience, but it's just not shown to the outside. They don't have any physical reactions. But the tingling, the cramping, the moving, because essentially you want to move your body to get the emotions out, and it's just comes down to you and how much you let go, how fast you let go of that point, because essentially you're making that decision inside of your head. You're resisting that urge for quite some time, and then at some point you're like, oh, whatever, let's just let go, let it feel, let it happen to me. And most of the time people don't look back. They're glad that they went to that point, but it's that resistance, that unknown in the beginning, to even be receptive to this. Yeah.
So somebody that is coming out of a marriage, how do you, I mean, this is your personal opinion, because we've already established that you get out of this whatever your body really needs to get out of it, I guess is a way of saying it. But how do you feel like somebody who's coming out of a relationship, and they feel they're broken, or they feel like maybe they were abused, although not everyone's abused. There's, like, let's just say you're coming out of it and you're really a broken person. How do you feel like this kind of therapy could be used to help somebody, really get through that and turn the page so that they can have, a great rest of their life?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is reconnecting to yourself, because most of the time your self-worth is broken because of the relationship you were in, or from that state from having someone to not having someone right now. So the ability to connect to yourself again, maybe even build trust again. Maybe you're not even able to trust someone at that point right now. So I would say that that part is very, very important, connecting to yourself and that that sense to yourself. And then also maybe the emotions you suppressed in the past, because you dealt with them during the session, they are a relief to the patterns that you have done in the past. So maybe you were the person that were abusing, in one way or the other. But you are being conscious now about those patterns because you have lived through those patterns in the session, and you are aware of them, and you have a different perspective on them. You, for example, you see the other side of the abuse, for example, even though you were the abuser before. So this is something that is just the mechanical part of this, because you're creating new neural pathways in your brain, and it's a mental clarity that you come out of afterwards. You have new perspectives, new thoughts about situations that you haven't had before.
Yeah, I think speaking to the men who are listening to this, so many guys get into these ruts where you'll see them years after they end a relationship, especially if they're left, where they just cannot function. They just cannot move on. It's like they're just kind of stuck in suspended animation. It's like they can't move on with their life. This kind of therapy will be so helpful for people like that, because sometimes you have to get out of your own way. I feel like sometimes that's what your subconscious is. It's something that's just blocking you from moving forward. And, we're not always consciously aware, most of the time we're not, why we're acting the way we're acting, why we're having the reaction that we're having to something. It's like it could be something as simple as, your kid does something that upsets you and you start screaming at them. And it's not about what your kid just did. It's because there's something going on inside you that's making you react a certain way. When you come out of a marriage, so many people, just move on to a new relationship, or they get stuck and they never really process what's been going on. And, I love how you talked at the beginning about how this is an alternative to talk therapy. So for those of you listening that want more instant gratification, this is a better therapy. This is a great therapy, because you do get instant gratification after a session, which lasts is it 45 minutes? I think it's about 45 minutes, right?
It's about, between 45 and 90 minutes. It depends. Yeah.
Okay. I think mine was probably on the lower end of that. But so, I mean, at the end of the day, you're coming out of this process and you immediately are getting some kind of clarity. Now, it's not like magic. It's not like all of a sudden everything that you possibly could ever, need explained to yourself is all of a sudden presented. I mean, it is still a process, but it's just a very different process than talk therapy. And speaking to a lot of the men listening to this, I know a lot of you don't like talk therapy. All right. I know you don't like it because guys just don't like to talk about themselves. They don't like to sit there and talk to a stranger. This is great. Teresa was just telling you, you don't even have to talk to her. Like you can if you want, but you don't have to talk to her. She's just there to guide you. And that's what I love about this is it's almost like self-therapy. You're you're having a therapy session with yourself. And what she's doing is helping you get into the state where it's possible for you to have this therapy session with yourself. It's absolutely fascinating. So you've done this. We go through this process. You bring someone back down, like the cool off period. That you return them back to a state where they can open their eyes and move on. One of the things, I think one of the first questions I asked you is how often can you do this? Should you do this? Or is there really no right answer to those questions?
And again, it depends. There is no right answer to this question, to be honest, because it really depends on what you want to get out of this. At some point, I was doing this every week, which is already a lot because you're upregulating your nervous system. You're creating chaos in your nervous system, and this is something you should have in mind, because even though after the session you have those profound relaxation, there was something very, very deep happening on your cellular level before that we kind of forget when we are out of the session again. And this is something we have to keep in mind moving forward. So most of the time I suggest 1 to 2 times a month.
Okay. And that's one of those things where, it's going to be different for everybody. That's the it depends part of it, because, everyone is very different. And I think a lot of people probably would just have, profound, realization about something after one session. I know I did. But I certainly think doing it multiple times would be just wonderful. So we've been talking about how we can use this. So are there specific things you can use this for? Like, let's say you want to stop, I don't know, smoking, or you want to stop drinking, or you're having trouble losing weight and you really want to try to figure out why you're, not losing weight, or, you want to get just healthier. You want to have a better relationship with your kids, like whatever it is. Is this something where you can pinpoint a very specific thing and use the therapy to really, really target that, like a laser?
Yeah, so this is the beauty of this practice, because essentially you can pinpoint everything, because it comes down to the subconscious, and I am talking to your subconscious in that state. So my clients usually have issues with fatigue, chronic stress, overwhelm, but also depression, anxiety, PTSD, relationship struggles, patterns of self-sabotage, limiting beliefs, fears, phobias, addiction problems, lack of concentration. And all comes down to essentially a suppressed emotion that is tied to an event or a memory. So essentially, it's everything that you kind of can do. Because you talked about the weight loss part. Usually, that is tied to an emotion that was suppressed too. If you're, and one thing that a lot of people don't know is that the lungs are one of our organs where we lose a lot of weight through, because we essentially have to get rid of our weight through the organs. And I think I'm not really explaining this in a good way, because English is not my mother language, but it's just because you're basically all the waste you've created in your body has to come out, and the lung is actually one of the major organs to do that.
Absolutely.
Because you're essentially breathing, you're breathing it out. We're always breathing it.
Yeah. I had no idea how much breath work can really change your life. It's something, again, one of the things that I really strive to do on this podcast is just to introduce people to new ways to help themselves. And this is certainly something that anyone can use. I mean, you don't have to be this person with all these issues. You could just be somebody who is stuck in a job you hate, and you just don't know how to get out of it. It could be about a relationship. It could just be your relationship with your own parents. Like, it could be anything, because you're right.
It can just be, because you're curious what is going to happen during that session, because you're I feel like I'm healthy and everything's fine with me, but what else is the breath going to show me?
Well, there's people out there that just think they're perfect and there's nothing wrong, which is interesting, because there's absolutely no such thing as someone who doesn't need to work on themselves. It doesn't exist. And when you work on yourself, you still have to keep working on yourself and keep working and keep working. It's just like keeping your body physically fit. You can't go to the gym for 6 months and eat healthy for 6 months and then just stop going to the gym and eating Cheetos. You have to continue to work.
Exactly.
And I just think this could be a very good part of working on yourself. And I really cannot say thank you enough for allowing me to go through a therapy session with you. And, I hope that I've conveyed how effective it was for me. And I have gone through every kind of talk therapy, mindset training, hypnosis, everything under the sun. It was one of the most effective things I've ever done. I thought it was absolutely excellent. So Teresa, if someone is interested in learning more or working with you, how would they go about contacting you? What kind of what do you sort of do for your clients? What kind of programs do you have?
Yeah, so the best way to contact me is through my website, shebreath.com. And no, I don't have just women as clients. I get this question all the time. The best idea is to just start with one session and just see what it does to you. And usually that is just, the snowball effect of what else could come up or what you want to explore. And then we can get into specifics, or you just want to explore. And I offer bundles for that. So you can have 3, 6, 9, 12 sessions, or we work in one-on-one, where you either, the beauty of this, and I will repeat saying this, is that you don't have to talk about certain things. But if we work one-on-one, I do have some questions and prompts, but you don't have to share them with me in the end, because essentially this is like you said it so nicely, self therapy, and I want to continue with this, because this is essentially the beauty of it. You don't have to talk about your issues. You just have to make peace with them within yourself.
So those of you that don't want to necessarily have to talk through everything, but you still want to get some help, this is a great way of proceeding. And those of you that still like to talk about what you're feeling, great too. So it's great for everybody. It's excellent.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. All of Teresa's contact information will be in the show notes, so you can go down there and get it all. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much.